Now we'll go a little bit different. We will look at a different scenario. We're getting more technical and more into hopefully useful information for developers for using their tools, using LLM for making their life easier with coding. We're talking about context window and context window problem. Think about following scenario. Last time, Björn had a talk about MCPs and how we can easily connect to different tools. In this example, I'm using Jira and GitLab. So that following scenario would be very interesting if we can, for example, automate some tasks, like you have a ticket in Jira, or you have a merge request, an open merge request with some comments on it. And yeah, a task would be like, hey, there is this merge request. Take a look at that. Are there some comments? Is there something to fix? Fix it and create a commit, push it back, and write a comment in Jira about what was done and so on. So that's the typical scenario you can do. I think Adam just did it today, something like that, very useful. In my examples, I'm using Cloud Code, or I'm talking about Cloud Code. You can also use other agents as well. It's actually almost the same, but these examples are all in Cloud Code, just so you know. So as I said, it's all set up, ready to work. All my tools, are connected. I can also show you, for example, we have our tools connected. When the mouse is working, I could show you. So this is some typical MCP server configuration. We have MCP Atlassian, and we have GitLab. So only those two. Nothing really special here. Yeah, and with that, actually, we can start Cloud. Let's directly do that. Why not? Just having some problems with my mouse. It's not there. Here it is. So we start a session. We want to do something, and first thing we want to see is, okay, you don't have to do that, but you can check your context. I mean, maybe normally you wouldn't do that, but in this specific case and in this demo, we will do that. Checking the context, and you can see, okay, all of my tools are loaded. Let's go. And yeah, what's that? 89% of my tokens are used here. It depends a little bit. Sometimes it's 93, sometimes it's 91. And as you can see, there is this nice chart, and you can see that the main point here, are MCP tools. So MCP tools are using a lot of context when you load them. It depends on the tools they provide, but looking at, for example, GitLab especially, providing 109 tools in total for interacting with GitLab uses a lot of context. And that could be very frustrating, and we will see why in this case. So again, in this case, 91%, and almost my full context is gone, and I haven't even started with anything. No code, no prompt, nothing. And I don't know if all of you know what the context window, what context is. It's quite simply, it's the memory of your AI. So you can think of it like everything you prompt, every information that goes out and every information that goes in is stored in that context. And for example, these 200,000 tokens, that's something specific to Cloud Code, is the amount of tokens you can use. And when almost 90% of the tokens are already gone, you don't have that much left. And you can see that around these 200,000 tokens are equal to like 100 to 120 files, around 150,000 words you can put in or get out of the context window. And when it's full, AI starts hallucinating at some point, and in the end, it will tell you that the context is full. So Cloud Code gives you an option by compacting things. We'll come to that later. So you can get some amount back, but in the end, it's a problem that when you want to start with your work, you don't have that much left to actually do. Those can be simple tasks like everyday tasks, reading some files or getting some extended information from Jira about a ticket or something like that. And this will fill up your context, and you can't even start doing something after that. So what can we do here? First, let's just put that in here. Like if you have no MCP servers at all, you can see there's also like 34% of the context taken. But in this case, like a lot of that is for compacting things. You can disable that actually, so you have more room left. But that's what's taken when you have no MCP servers set up in a like vanilla like cloud environment, cloud code environment. Adding Jira, we will look into that later with 3 essential tools loaded. It's like 35%, so not that much. Full Jira going up to 52%, still okay. Adding GitLab with 109 tools up to 74%, and with a little bit more, in this case, like also adding Confluence tools, you can enable that separately, or some other service, and you're like around 91%. This is not really acceptable. So nothing to say about that. I think it's quite clear that we have a problem here. Those are just some slides where you can see, okay, where it's actually going. That 57.2% are the MCP tools, and that's quite a lot. And I mean, if you want to use them, you have to add them. Yeah? So what options do we have to actually make our life easier and get some of this context back? One thing would be I can only load the MCP if I need it. I can add it to my configuration, but yeah, I mean, we want our tools and we want them when we want to use them, but yeah, don't change the configuration every time. That's not something very convenient. Just some things you really can't do. Already stated that really nothing really possible. Read large files, code reviews. So tools are defeating their own purpose in this case. And provided 3 solutions actually. The first 2 are like 2 solutions that we can actually do to improve loading of MCP servers. And the third one is more or less general approach to work with the context you have, to work with that limited space you have, because it's not getting any bigger at the moment. As I said, LLMs have different context sizes. I think, don't get me wrong, like Gemini has around 1 million. So it's quite a lot compared to Cloud Code with 200,000, but it's still very much compared to others. Like I'm not quite sure, ChatGPT around 5,000, something like that. So, but still, it's limited, and we want to do something about it. First thing is like strategic tool selection. What does it mean? If the MCP server allows you to, for example, just set the tools you need, that would be an option to go. I can also show you that. So again, when the mouse is working, here it is. Yeah. In this case, Atlassian does allow to actually enable certain tools. Yeah. So I don't need that much from it. I don't need Confluence at the moment. I need Jira for searching for topics, for adding comments, and for retrieving issues. There are others naturally, but it depends on your need. So everybody can configure this. It's actually 2 lines of code, and with this setup, we can again start our session. And let's see what this brings us. We still have GitLab in there. Yeah? We'll come back to that later. Is there an improvement? Yes, it is. Like with only loading what I really need, in this case, when the MCP gives you that option, I can get down to like 71% token usage. It's a slight improvement. And in some cases, this can help. For example, if I don't have GitLab at all, if I don't need it, this could be a way to go. GitLab does not provide you with that option. You don't have the option to actually add, in this case, with this MCP server, don't have the option to actually set the tools that you want to enable. They are all enabled. And yeah, This is still not good because I mean it's an improvement. On the left side, I provide different view. That's only the Atlassian server with the tool selection without GitLab. So there's no GitLab in here. As you can see, the tools itself is like 35%. If you can remember what I showed you in the beginning, it's a slide. So these three tools take around 3% of the context window. So not that much. It's a really good improvement on the servers that allow this kind of configuration. What can we do about GitLab? Are there any other options? Obviously there are. Pinpoint is actually lazy loading. So that's really something that changes the way you can add MCP servers with a lot of tools. It's working for almost all the tools, except if there's a bug. So at the moment, there is a bug, for example, in this Atlassian MCP, but with others, it's working quite fine. I will show you before I will talk about it. I will simply show you because I think that's quite interesting. So we have a third demo, and again, we will start our session, and let's get ready to work. So we're looking at the context again. Oh, interesting, huh? What happens now? 37%. That's almost like a vanilla state of Cloud Code, without MCP servers installed. So what happens here? Actually, we're using a proxy. It's also an MCP server, which acts as a proxy for all the other MCP servers. It's called MCP funnel in this case. This allows us, or you as a developer, to lazy load the tools you need. The difference in the configuration is, as I said, with MCP Atlassian at the moment does not work, but with the first thing we did, like tool selection, I don't have a problem with that. So I can keep it as it is. And as a second MCP server, all I have configured is this MCP funnel with a separate configuration. And when we take a look at this configuration, you can see it's quite similar to the old one with the servers configuration. It's an identical configuration, so it's nothing really special. You just have to take this part of your configuration, put it into this file, and the proxy is all set up. That's all there is to it. And with this setup, you are actually allowing, or you're enabling Cloud Code to use this proxy server to search for tools if you need them. So I can also add tools I definitely need. I did that in this case. Maybe if you've seen here, there are some tools pre-selected from GitLab, because there are some downsides. We will look at that, like response times, latency. It takes a little bit to look up the tools. So you can pre-provide your agent with some tools. They're preloaded, but this doesn't mean that you can't look up others. So if you have different tasks that you might need to do, if you give me our initial example, I don't have to do this. I just say, okay, look up the merge request, and it will work. Yeah, it will look up the merge request. It will look for the right tool to use, provide it, and Cloud Code can then use this tool from the MCP server without preloading it into the context. And that's the benefit of it, giving you context back, giving you the option to actually use your tool, use Cloud Code the way it's supposed to be without worrying. At this point, you can still fill up context. If you have complex tasks, big topics with a lot of automation, with a lot of things back and forth, where you are giving input, reviewing things from different angles, like you can use different personas to give you a more of a critical view on things and so on. So there are a lot of things you can use. We're not talking about prompting, but with complex prompting, you will get more context. But this is really a game changer in this case, because from an unusable state or an almost unusable state with tools that are really practical and really good and really improving your workflow with the AI. So it's as I said in the beginning, you can almost automate things like reviewing things or getting information from different sources. And we're not only talking about GitLab, there are others like Figma. I mean, we had this MCP talk already. Not going into detail here, but there are MCPs for everything, and they all have tools, and they're all preloaded into your agent. And with this funneling, setting this up as a proxy, you're actually freeing up space and giving you the option to really use that context you have. Here again, we have this comparison between before and after. And as you can see, it's almost all used by the MCP tools. As I said, we already covered the pros. There are some cons. Like naturally, there's a bit of latency, and Cloud has to discover the tools first. So there's a discovery step. When you've used it, it will, when you try to access an MCP, it will use the tool, and then it takes some time to work on that. But in this case, you have an additional step discovering the tools. This also might need 2 rounds, so maybe it's not discovering the tool in the first round, or it's discovering the wrong tool, depending on what you're asking. And so this might be a con, and it's slightly less magical in this case because of the discovery. So, and the last point, the dependency. Yeah, you have one more file you have to manage, but normally it's a one-time setup, and giving the pros, I think we can all live with the cons in this case. So this is some good thing, and I already talked about, and now I'm coming to the last point. This point is not about MCPs. It's about the context itself. As I already said, you can still fill up context. Yeah? From a technical and configurational perspective, you did everything you can do to provide you with as much context as possible, but still you can fill it up. And here it comes to a few points that that you can do as a developer to get the best out of it as possible. We will look into that. Active session management is the first one. So what does it mean? There are a few things, especially, again, talking about Cloud Code, but you have the same thing in other agents as well. For Cloud Code speaking, you have these free commands like clear, compact, and usage. Usage is wrong. There should be context. That was my fault. I will correct that afterwards. It's not usage, it's context, the one we used. Usage is for actually for showing the session usage. That's something completely different, and it depends on how much you pay for it. So it's context in this case. What you should do actually, what I did right now, you should periodically check your context. See, I mean, if you have a desk and some things are lying around, you're obviously seeing how much free space you have left to put some things on there, or your bookshelf or so on for your books. And when it's time to buy something new, or when it's time to, in this case, get rid of some books. But so check your context, because as you see, I mean, there's up to 70%, everything's fine. Starting with 70%, you have to take measures. Like the first thing you want to do is compact your context. What it actually does, it slims down the information to something it still can work with, but it will free up some of the context you still have. So that's a good thing you should think of. When you reach a certain point, do not fear to clear your context. This will actually remove all the information. So you have to do some other stuff. We will look into that afterwards to actually being able to use that command. So the first thing in this case is persist your things. Persistent memory in this case use external memory like CloudMD file. CloudMD file normally is used in this case for giving Cloud actually some extra context about your project. You can actually create it automatically, but you can also add to it. So whenever possible, so from example, what I'm doing, when I have a complex task at the end, it depends. The CloudMD file is about the project, but you can also use session files in this case for a specific task. It's as simple as saying that the AI, okay, what we did now, please create a session file for that, add everything we did. And that's something I do all the time. So when I have one task or at the end of a day, or when I want to close the context window, I simply say, okay, wrap it up, update the session file with everything we did today. And also, if I feel the need to update the CloudMD file, if there's something regarding the project I want to update, some new insights that are beneficial for the whole project, I can also add that to the CloudMD file. And with this information, you can actually clear the session. without losing any information because the files are right there. And you can use them. If you start up Claude again, it knows about the project through the CloudMD file and especially about this specific session without spamming your context. Yeah. So it's like an external memory that's available as files. And yeah, one more option, and this is also something very beneficial if you want to share these things, you can add it to Git eventually. So versioning and you can share it with others. So other people can have the same context information as you have. So if you're adding it and somebody else will continue on this, their Cloud Code session also knows about it and also can use that information that you collected or your AI assistant collected in this case. But that's also something very convenient. Collaborating in those things, and you can even go that far, like having two tabs with Claude open, and they can work at the same task at the same time with two context windows, because each session has its own context. So if you start two sessions, you have double amount of context available. They can work at two tasks simultaneously with the same information provided in those external memory files. Yeah, that's just something, break large tasks into phases. It's like actually working in code, like breaking a large task into smaller commits. It's actually something similar. Yeah, gave some examples here. Do research, save the summary, like I said, clear. Start with fresh context, implement, commit it, clear, test, save results, clear the context. Just some examples. Yeah, this is, as I said, at the end of the day, whenever you close the Claude session, it also makes sense. Yeah, because maybe you don't want to stay in it. You say exit on Claude, and then you're out of it, and it also clears the session. So it totally makes sense. But following this approach, you will most likely never end up with a full context when configuring the MCP servers you're using beforehand. One Cloud Code specific, use sub agents. They have their own context. So in Cloud Code, you can create sub agents for some specific task. Actually, I have a sub agent for handling all the Git stuff. Cloud Code asks you, it's a topic for itself, but Cloud Code provides you with some assistant to create those sub agents. It's quite easy. You can alter those sub agents. So if you're providing information that might not be good enough in the future, you can update them. They're all file based. So you can also share those sub agents when you have them in your code base as well. They're in your Cloud directory in the project, and you can also share them with others. Other people in your company or working on the same project can use them as well. And as I said, the main point, they have their own context. So whenever you hand something over to a sub agent on your work, like for example, I'm not writing whatever I said, create a commit and so on, look into this. I give this topic to the sub agent and tell the sub agent, okay, sub agent, look into this, and then it's handed over to this persona. And since it's trained on a certain task, it also does it better than your main context, because I trained it on, it's with a prompt, it's trained to a specific task and it's good at that. It's following rules you provided, and so there are a lot of benefits using sub agents in Cloud Code Notes, apart from the fact that they have their own context. Coming to the end already. So it's not just a Cloud Code problem. We have this GitHub Copilot, for example, has even less context. Yeah, it's for every AI agent. It will maybe get better. Yeah, maybe context window will improve, so we will get more tokens in the future. Like I said, I think Gemini is using like 1 million tokens. Maybe the tools are getting better for selecting the tools you want without lazy loading them. Not all MCPs are providing that, but maybe in the future this will improve, and heavy tools or heavy MCPs like GitLab with like 109 tools would also benefit from the option to actually choose it. Yeah, it's a little bit context is the new bottleneck. I wrote it. Yeah, it definitely is, because it's what you have and what you have to work with. With the given tools and with strategic approach to how you work with it, as I said, will actually allow you to work with what you have without getting into this context window problem.
Can you maybe explain how to interact with the sub-agent?
I can, if you want to. Yes, sure. I will do afterwards. Huh? I will give you a slide. Just some things to remember. You can have all not the slides, but everything you've seen here is on GitHub. Also the config files I showed you, so they're all there. You can use them if you want to, if you like. Also some links to these tools, MCP funnel, MCP Atlassian, MCP GitLab I was showing here. You can check this out. MCP. I will show you. Just give me a second. I will switch project because this is specifically for. So there are some agents, for example. Let's take a look at this one. So just let's do it this way. So this is an agent, sub-agent I created. The benefit is, for example, you give a small input and you get out a nice description what the sub-agent actually wants to do. In this case, Git workflow expert with decades of experience and so on. Core responsibilities. We have some guidelines. Define some guidelines with examples. With some information about what it should do about pre-commit hook handling and rebasing and so on. So that's something I created. I can show you how it is created. If you give me a second. Also something else, a Jira task analyzer. It's analyzing the task and thinking about possible solutions, providing you with the best option. Yeah. Merge request investigation, context gathering, and so on and so forth. So that's quite testing strategies. Yeah, quite a lot in this case. So that's.
If you are now in a prompt, how?
Yeah, I will show you. Just a second. Let's see. We have this agent. For example, we want to create a new agent, and I mean, I've already created that one, I guess. I have to check if they're there. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So it's like with everything in Cloud Code. With the add command, you can reference agents, files, and MCP servers. They're all there. So in this case, I want to ask I hope it works. No, it's not. I've not provided it. The Gemini Research Dash. That's something very interesting because, as I said, there's not only Cloud Code, but also Gemini CLI, for example. And you can actually train an agent here to do research not with Claude, but with Gemini. So this agent, for example, is using Gemini to actually look up things because Gemini can use Google search, which Cloud Code can't. And yeah, so using an AI, like, give me a list of the best. I have this pizza restaurants in Vienna. I hope it's control. Not sure if it's control. So this is the extended view. That's where we are right now. Yes, it was. Yeah, last time it actually took a while. I want to proceed web search. Not quite sure what it does now. Yeah, it's okay.
Choose the way later.
Yeah. No one tells Claude what to do differently. I mean, I've shown Adam is last time it worked, so it was actually let's see what it does. Let's proceed and look what it's doing. I mean, it's still how we can use the sub agents. So that's what it's all about.
You're running out of the last time.
Huh? But overall, that's what it's doing. So you can call the sub agent, ask to handle a certain task, and it will do it. And it will not use your main context. That's the point of the relating to this certain topic. So it's quite a good thing you can do. Let's see what the outcome is. I mean, it's just one request. The interesting thing here might not be if it's using Google now or not. So it should actually. The interesting part in this case is that actually you're providing a more or less generic information or a question like provide me with the best pizza restaurants. And let's try to get this back. And it's prompting for you. So it's refining the prompt. I have not written this, the research specialist did. So the agent improved my more or less one sentence prompt to something like that. And that's also something very interesting in this case. Because it's trained to do that. I specifically said the research agent, okay, make the best prompts or make the best out of what you get to retrieve the best results. And that's what it's doing. And yeah, that's also a benefit of using the sub-agents, as you can see, apart from the fact that it's not using your main context, but also improving your prompts.
Claude is also providing a capability called skills. Have you heard about that? Can you explain what it is?
Yes, more or less. So in my opinion, I also have that in Cloud. So when Cloud Desktop, I enabled the Atlassian skill. There is a skill. It's more or less like an MCP server, but provided by Cloud. I think it's hosted by them, so it's not locally on your machine. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think. I haven't gotten into details. I haven't looked it up, but that's my opinion about skills because it's providing you with the same output. I tried both, enabling the Atlassian skill. It's asking for an OAuth authentication, so you get this OAuth window. You're allowing it to access your Atlassian, and in this case, the output is the same, but it's something that Cloud is providing, and you're not able to set up yourself, and it's called skill. I would say that's, yeah, here we go. So we have this information about it. Took a while to say, but about winning must try with information about it, address and so on, alternatives. Oh, yeah. And with that, thank you. And I haven't checked the chat, but if you have some questions that are not answered, feel free.
I have one question because as I started the prompting, let's say, I got this error, with the exceed maximum out token. Please use pagination filter.
Yeah, exactly. So.
But I still worked for it, and I mean, I got the answer.
Yeah.
So did you get also often this error message or what?
Not often. It depends. For example, you have to following. The MCP tool doesn't know what it gets. Yeah, it has tools that can connect to like you said to GitLab in this case. Yeah, and merge request history is quite long at some point. Yeah, merge request history can get quite long. It depends how often you commit things, how often you have to build something, and so on. Okay. And context is limited. Yeah. So this error just means that it is the context you're trying to retrieve is too long. Yeah. Okay, and that's why you get an error, and it's shown that there is an error. But the AI will try a different approach. As you said, it will try something else, use a different tool, do some clipping, only get parts of it, leave it to the AI. It will do the job. Yeah. You will see the error, but unless it tells you that it can't do it, it will try different approaches and provide you with the information that is needed. Yeah. So the error simply says, okay, it was too long. That can happen because, as I said, it doesn't know what it gets, but it will try different approaches and will eventually work out.
But basically, they're not using this lazy loading.
No, it doesn't have to. It doesn't. Yes, if you're not
using them, then you will get this error and then stop everything.
There's also, I think, there's a limit to how long a message can be as well. So it's not only about the context that you're retrieving; it's also about the message length. But as I said, so I think it was your first. It doesn't have to do with the context window itself. It's more like the length of the information you're trying to retrieve. It's also limited, but it will find another way to get the information you want, which it did in your case.